and wish you best of luck with your mother. You see, it goes all ways, ladies and gentlemen. It goes every direction. DF right here. Great to see you, DF. We can't stand up because the normie cons, what we refer to as vagues. Thank you, brother. The reason why I don't like Normie and haven't, Normie's been around for a long time, like Lemming. And I know that Pierce used Lemming, and I just, Normie, of course, you're not going to be able to separate. Words have meaning. And I'll just say very briefly that when you call someone a normie, you are calling them in a very real, substantive, fundamental way normal, and yourself abnormal. You never want to do that. It's like I said, even if you have an insulated group, and we can all agree that, okay, in our really insulated group, in our little ghetto here, that this word, that word whatever, is going to mean something for us, even if it doesn't mean that way for everybody else. It doesn't change it in your mind the way you learned it. So tree, no matter if we all agree here that the word tree means something else, then every time we say tree, you're still going to see a tree. It's still going to mean tree for you. So when you say normie, here, we know what you mean. We know what you're trying to mean. But on the subconscious level where it really matters, your mind is thinking they're the normal ones. You are the abnormal, because you did not learn as a child first. You didn't come up in the world being told that that the word normie has nothing to do with normal. It means all of these negative things. And then you learned later that, well, normal also means an ordinary, or the average, or or healthy, something that is conducive. I used to argue normal is that which is conducive for Western civilization, and an abnormal or an aberration is that which is detrimental to Western civilization. So that's just a recommendation there. So the vagues, and DF says we can't stand up because the vagues are still asleep. We have to wait for an Overton window. I'm going to give you another suggestion, DF, and this is great because this is a great opportunity for you to learn, to go free, and to be far healthier. You have to get out of the anti-white narrative. You're using there the phrase normie. We just talked about that. The word normie, we just talked about that. And now you're using Overton window. The Overton window only exists inside the anti-white narrative. It does not exist outside the anti-white narrative. Those outside the anti-white narrative never use this phrase Overton window. Why is that? Because the window is what you are allowed to look through and talk about inside of the anti-white narrative. So not only are you in a falsehood, this narrative, but then you have strictures put on what you're allowed to talk about inside of the anti-white. You could not be more straitjacketed. So you never legitimize the anti-white narrative by using their verbiage, their concepts inside their narrative. Outside, I mean, again, it's like we could go back to St. Elizabeth, the insane asylum. And it would be like submitting yourself to the crazy people who say, well, look, you can talk about whether there's a Tyrannosaurus, or you can't talk about whether or not there is an invisible Tyrannosaurus Rex. That is just it's a fact. You can talk about whether or not we are allowed to have Y or X in the hours from 9 to 12. If you submit yourself to that, there's no hope for you. That is what the Overton window is all about. And where this comes from, there's nothing wrong with this, DF. Nothing wrong with you or with this. This is where everybody comes from. Everybody else, regrettably, is inside the anti-white narrative. That's why they keep losing. That's why we keep winning. That's why we keep having or having victories. That's why we keep changing lives, is because we are outside the anti-white narrative. Now, the other thing, I'm going to make another suggestion for you to consider here is to use your powerful brain to think about the ways you can stand up. See, what you just said here is we can't stand up because when you do that with your brain will give you all of the reasons why you will fail, why there is nothing you can do. And the brain is a miraculous machine. It will go to work, and it will happily tell you, these are all the reasons why you will fail if if you try to stand up. And I am assuming that when you say stand up, what you mean is get active, is get out there, is to bring people to going free, to help them to free themselves of anti-whiteism. I presume that's what you mean when you say stand up. We absolutely can stand up. We absolutely are standing up. We absolutely are making an enormous difference. We are doing it before and behind the scenes. We have had victories that we predicted, and that many of these folks are finally, they caught on. They said, holy God, I now get what Jason's talking about. We predicted huge victories, 2 weeks, 1 week, 4 days, huge victory. And then another huge victory. There are other huge victories that haven't percolated out for everybody to see yet, and there are more percolating up for more to see. We are having colossal victories, and in spite of the fact that vagues, as you referred here, are asleep. Now, that's the other problem here is to call them, is to just categorize the vagues as asleep. No, they are suffering with mean pathogens. They are diseased. They are suffering with what we refer to as white noir. And when our brother or sister is sick, don't we go to try to help them? You see how these things also produce, we talk about thought chains, but it produces the motivations in you to do the right thing. If you refer to the population as just a bunch of people who are asleep, then you are inclined to feel almost like contempt or enmity for them. Why won't they wake up? All this going on in the world, why won't they wake up and come do something that's right? That is where the thought process leads for most when you think about them all just being asleep. Instead, think of them as ill, because that's what they are. And when you see a brother or sister that's ill, you want to help them. If you see, it's the natural inclination of Western kind. If you see somebody on the side of the road and the car is broken down and they are a vulnerable member of our people, you pull over to help them, or you call help for them, and you say, hey, police department, there's somebody on the side of the road. They look like they broke down. Would you go help them out? They look like they need help. That's what we do. If somebody faints, I'll tell you all, this is the spirit of Western kind. And we all have this spirit of Western kind. Years ago, I shared this the other day when it came back to me for another reason. I was at the gym, and the gym was full of people. This was many years ago. And there was this one Asian girl. She was probably like late teens, early 20s. And she was by herself. She was sitting down on one of these elevated, like stretching platforms. And she just tears streaming down her face. And everybody of all races, it's a very racially heterogeneous area, as you know, Northern Virginia, of all races and religions, are just walking right by her, seeing this young girl crying in their midst, and nobody doing or saying anything about this. So I couldn't believe it. When I first saw her, I looked around and I was just like, I first thought was, she must have a friend nearby, and somebody is going to get to her before I walk that distance. And who's it going to be? Is it going to be this person with those weird robes on that look weird to me, that I'm sure are superior to my style of dress? Or is it going to be this person over here? Or is it going to be that? And as I'm walking closer, I'm thinking, did she fall? Did she? And I didn't see that she had any injury. She wasn't holding like a limb or not. She's just tears streaming down this poor girl's face. And I couldn't believe it, that I was able to reach her before all of these people crisscrossing all around her, working out on the machinery, did anything. And I just stepped up beside her, and I patted and I rubbed her back, and I asked, "Are you okay? Is there anything I can do? Can I get somebody for you? Is there? Did you hurt yourself, or is this something else?" And she's just kind of shaking her head and nod and back and forth, or nodding to my questions. And I wasn't. It seemed perhaps I helped some. I mean, I don't know, showing that just compassion for somebody, something that is very innate for us, and that we elicit from our people when we look at our brothers and sisters as sick rather than asleep, as contemptuous fools who are asleep, as people who are sick, who need our help. And I eventually said to her, this is probably not a good place for you to be. To be in this state. I mean, there are people everywhere, and nobody's helping you. Is there someplace you can go? Is there somebody you can call? And she nodded her head yes. And then I helped her stand up, and then she walked away. I have no idea what happened to her. Maybe it was something frivolous, like lost the boyfriend, or something quite serious like a family member died, or something like this. But it is that normal human compassion that we feel, and that is what we elicit from our brothers and sisters when we talk about them in this way. So this is a wonderful opportunity for DF, strong man, because we know now that you have the ability to make great leaps and bounds with your growth now, and you can acquire Go Free. I would suggest maybe, since I'm about to come out with the iteration 2, make it a Kindle version, because I understand you can just download the new iteration rather than having to buy the next iteration if you do it that way, and begin going free, brother. We need you to get out of that morass of the anti-white narrative. Stop there. You might have to stop listening to some of the content creators or reading the content creators that are still stuck in that morass for a little while, so that you can have this paradigm shift. Get away from it. Get away from never use Overton Window again. Never use that. Don't call our brothers and sisters asleep. Don't refer to the brothers and sisters as normies. If you want to say vague, that's what we use here, because they're vague in the sense of the word vague. To us, as we look at them, we don't know where they are, and to themselves, if they haven't chosen a path yet, they're still inside of the anti-white narrative. So do that. Now's your time to grow. Now's your time, really. And others here in the chat will share with you how the world just opens up when you get outside of the anti-white narrative and you begin to look in and see how absolutely monstrous, how poisonous, how venomous anti-whiteism actually is, and that there is no part of it that you should submit yourself to and speak within. So thank you so very much for for your statement here, and that opportunity to grow and for us to talk about it, because there's going to be very many more who are going to hear this live and in replay, who can use that in part or in whole, the advice that we just shared. Nordic Iron says, well put, no white guilt. I think those points regarding the military are definitely missed